Made it an annual tradition to provide updates on the case close to the time of her murder.
Investigators in Colorado say they have new evidence in the JonBenét Ramsey case.
Nearly 3 decades since the death of 6-year-old beauty queen JonBenét Ramsey, Boulder, Colorado police say they now have new evidence.
The news reports that flickered across television screens that morning carried more than shock. They carried an echo of innocence lost, a mystery that would grip the nation and never fully release its hold. The words, clipped and precise, announced the death of a 6-year-old girl, her life snatched in a manner that seemed both surreal and horrifying, leaving behind a shadow that refused to fade. Behind the polite restraint of the journalists' voices lay a darker story, one of ambition, obsession, and secrets, buried beneath the polished surface of privilege. December 26, 1996 had become more than a date. It had become a riddle written in a suburban home in Boulder, Colorado. A riddle that would haunt investigators, journalists, and the public for decades. Welcome to Starlit Mystery. On that frigid morning in Boulder, the body of JonBenét Patricia Ramsey was discovered in the basement of her family home. The child beauty queen, known to many for her precocious charm and flawless pageant performances, had been gone for hours before anyone realized the magnitude of the horror unfolding behind the closed doors of the Ramsey household. The house itself, immaculate and sunlit in the photographs, now seemed to hide shadows that no amount of sunshine could reach. The crime scene was confusing, the evidence contradictory, and the whispers began immediately. How could a child vanish from the very home meant to protect her? Some believed a stranger had entered unnoticed. Rumors persisted that those closest to her may have known more than they revealed. The mystery was immediate, psychological, and suffocating, wrapping the city in a veil of fear and speculation. To understand the tragedy, one must first rewind back to the very beginning. JonBenét Ramsey was born on August 6, 1990 in Atlanta, Georgia, to JonBenét Ramsey and Patricia Ann Patsy Ramsey. The union of her parents was one of contrasts. John, a successful businessman with a commanding presence, and Patsy, a former nurse turned fiercely ambitious mother, meticulous in appearance, and determined to shape the world according to her vision. JonBenét's early years were steeped in affluence, but also in structure and expectation. From the start, she displayed a personality that was both vivacious and intense, a child aware of the gaze of others, a performer before she could even understand the meaning of the word. By the time JonBenét turned 3, she had already begun appearing in local modeling photographs and beauty competitions. Her mother, deeply invested in the child's public image, pushed her into the world of pageantry with a relentless precision. Early observers noted that JonBenét had a natural charisma, a way of holding attention that went beyond her years. Friends and neighbors would later describe her as polite and articulate, but also unusually aware of the demands placed upon her, a child who seemed to carry the weight of expectation lightly, yet with the shadow of tension beneath her smile. Some believe that in those early years the foundation of her fascination with performance and approval was laid, a seed that would later blossom into national attention and scrutiny. The Ramsey household, while outwardly serene, had undercurrents that hinted at complexity. John Ramsey's career demanded presence, travel, and public appearances, leaving Patsy to orchestrate JonBenét's training, diet, and pageant schedule with almost military precision. There were whispers among acquaintances that the environment was intensely regimented, that JonBenét's days were meticulously planned, and that even moments of play were often shadowed by lessons on posture, poise, and presentation. It was an environment designed to mold excellence, yet one that might have left little room for the unstructured innocence typical of childhood. According to those close to the family, the child was happy and adored, but the intensity of her upbringing left a mark, subtle but enduring. By 1992, JonBenét's presence in the pageant world had become impossible to ignore. Early victories in local competitions introduced her to the national circuit, and her striking blue eyes, wide smile, and precise performances began attracting attention. The combination of her mother's meticulous coaching and JonBenét's natural aptitude propelled her to regional titles, drawing local media coverage and the admiration of other pageant families. It was during these years that JonBenet began to understand the duality of attention. The applause and praise were exhilarating, but the scrutiny and expectation could be relentless. As the family moved to Boulder, Colorado, in 1991, they sought both opportunity and security. The home was spacious and located in an affluent neighborhood, offering privacy while placing the family within a community that prized success and social standing. JonBenét's training intensified. Dance classes, modeling sessions, and early acting lessons filled her schedule. She thrived under this structure, yet the intensity of her life was not without cost. The pressures of maintaining perfection, of performing constantly under her mother's watchful eye, created a tension that few could see, but that shaped her young psyche. By early 1995, JonBenet was a recognized name in child pageantry circles. National competitions, televised appearances, and magazine features elevated her from local prodigy to a figure of broader fascination. Her personality, vivacious yet precociously self-aware, drew admiration from adults and envy from peers. Some believe that at this stage, JonBenet already possessed an understanding of her own public persona, and that the world's gaze, both admiring and critical, began to influence her identity in profound ways. The stage was set for a life that promised acclaim, yet it also hid the fragile human vulnerability beneath the polished exterior. The trajectory was not linear. It was shaped by ambition, parental influence, societal fascination with child beauty, and the subtle psychological weight of a childhood spent performing for approval. Each victory, each photograph, each title carried with it an invisible burden, one that few outside the family could perceive, but that would echo through the final tragic events of December 26, 1996. By 1995 and early 1996, JonBenét Ramsey had become a fixture in the national child pageant scene. A young girl whose poise and charisma drew admiration from judges, media, and audiences alike. Photographs of her in sparkling gowns, her hair meticulously styled, her wide blue eyes captivating cameras, appeared in local newspapers and magazines, cementing her image as a prodigy of precocious charm. Yet beneath the glittering surface of sequins and trophies, the pressures of constant performance began to accumulate. The applause was intoxicating, but it was also demanding. A constant reminder that the world expected perfection from a child too young to fully understand its weight. The Ramsey household, meticulously maintained and socially prominent, became both a sanctuary and a cage. John Ramsey, a disciplined and often commanding presence, was absorbed in his business endeavors, yet deeply protective of his family's public image. Patsy Ramsey, fiercely ambitious and meticulous, orchestrated JonBenét's life with an almost obsessive attention to detail. According to those close to them, the family's life was structured around achievement and appearances, a world where mistakes were minimized and the gaze of others held tremendous significance. Some believe this environment fostered exceptional discipline, while others argue it may have created an atmosphere of quiet tension, a breeding ground for both ambition and vulnerability. As JonBenét's fame grew, so too did the scrutiny. Interviews, photo shoots, and public appearances brought admiration, but also subtle criticism. Rumors persisted that the child was overworked, that her childhood was being consumed by an industry that demanded more than her young body and mind could sustain. According to those close to her, JonBenet herself was both resilient and impressionable, a young girl who craved approval, yet also possessed an innate awareness of the world's gaze. It was an awareness that sharpened her performances, but also heightened her exposure to pressures far beyond her years. The family's prominence in Boulder's social scene added another layer to the narrative. Their neighbors observed the Ramseys as polite, ambitious, and deeply invested in appearances. Some believe that in this environment, whispers of jealousy, envy, and speculation quietly circulated, setting the stage for the intense media scrutiny that would follow the events of December 26, 1996. The veneer of perfection, carefully cultivated through public appearances and achievements, concealed the complex interplay of personality, expectation, and vulnerability within the household. In the months leading up to that fateful day, the Ramseys continued to balance their child's burgeoning fame with the demands of everyday life. JonBenét's schedule was relentless. Pageants, rehearsals, and photo shoots intertwined with schoolwork, family obligations, and moments of play that were often brief and carefully monitored. Some believed that this rigorous structure left little room for spontaneity, for the unstructured joys of childhood, while others emphasized JonBenét's natural adaptability and joy in performance. According to those close to the family, she exhibited both delight in her achievements and an almost eerie composure, a child acutely attuned to the expectations of adults. The day of December 25, 1996 began like any other in the Ramsey household, with the family celebrating Christmas in their familiar routines. Yet by nightfall, the world would shift irrevocably. When JonBenét was reported missing the following morning, the meticulously maintained home became a scene of chaos, fear, and suspicion. Investigators were confronted with an enigmatic crime scene. Signs of struggle, unexplained injuries, and a cryptic ransom note that seemed to suggest premeditation and a chilling awareness of the family's private life. Rumors persisted that the note contained details only someone within the household could have known, while others believed it was the work of a stranger, skilled in manipulation and calculation. Some believed the tone of the note, its meticulous handwriting, and its precise demands hinted at a complexity that has confounded investigators for decades. Media coverage exploded immediately. Headlines screamed of tragedy, scandal, and mystery, and the Ramseys found themselves thrust into a global spotlight. Each photograph, each interview, each speculation became part of a narrative that was both invasive and impossible to ignore. According to those who observed the family during this period, the public scrutiny intensified the already present tension, forcing every movement, word, and decision under the unforgiving gaze of a nation hungry for answers. Some believe that this relentless attention may have distorted perceptions of the family, creating a chasm between public image and private reality that would never fully reconcile. By late 1996, as the investigation deepened, layers of secrecy, contradiction, and rumor began to surface. Some believed that the dynamics within the Ramsey household, their relationships, personality traits, and social position, became focal points for both suspicion and speculation. Rumors persisted that the child's remarkable success in pageantry, combined with the meticulous oversight of her parents, created circumstances ripe for tragedy. Investigators struggled to untangle truth from conjecture, leaving a cloud of ambiguity that continues to fascinate and haunt. The events of that fateful Christmas night were a turning point not only in the narrative of JonBenét's life, but also in the cultural consciousness. December 26, 1996 would forever be remembered as a day when innocence was extinguished, a day when a child's bright promise was eclipsed by darkness and mystery. The story of JonBenét Ramsey became a cautionary tale of ambition, expectation, and the fragile intersection between private life and public obsession. The morning of December 26, 1996, dawned with an unsettling quiet. The Ramseys' home, immaculate and ordinary in appearance, had become the epicenter of an unimaginable tragedy. When Patsy Ramsey discovered her daughter missing from her bedroom, panic erupted into disbelief. The house, which had contained laughter, discipline, and routine, now echoed with tension and fear. Investigators, arriving on the scene, were immediately confronted with a puzzle of contradictions. A cryptic ransom note demanding $118,000, details known only to the family, and physical evidence that confounded simple explanation. The media descended, capturing every moment, every expression, every whispered theory, projecting it to an audience captivated by horror, fascination, and the search for answers. The investigation itself became a theater of suspicion. Detectives combed the home, interviewed friends and neighbors, and examined the Ramsey family with an intensity that blurred privacy and scrutiny. Rumors persisted that those closest to JonBenét held secrets, while some believed the crime was the work of a meticulous intruder. According to those involved in the case, the inconsistencies in the ransom note, the peculiar staging of evidence, and the timing of discovery deepened the psychological complexity of the tragedy. Every detail became a thread in a tapestry of mystery that refused to be unraveled. As the world watched, public perception shifted from mourning to speculation. Headlines questioned the family's narrative. Photographs of JonBenét in pageant regalia, juxtaposed against news of her death, became symbols of both innocence and eerie precocity. Some believed that the national obsession with her beauty pageant success fed a darker fascination with her demise, that society's collective gaze both idolized and objectified a child too young to consent to either. Rumors persisted regarding internal family dynamics, jealousy, and unspoken tensions, yet no definitive conclusions could reconcile the emotional weight of the loss with the forensic evidence available. The years following the tragedy were marked by unresolved tension. The case saw multiple reinvestigations, forensic analysis, and public debates. Yet the truth remained elusive. Some believe that law enforcement's focus on the family obscured potential leads, while others argue that the cryptic nature of the crime itself ensures it may never be fully understood. According to those following the case closely, every new theory, every renewed investigation, only reinforced the haunting sense that JonBenét's life, brief as it was, became a mirror, reflecting societal fascination with innocence, crime, and scandal. Through the lens of history, JonBenét Ramsey's story is more than a tale of tragedy. It is a reflection of the pressures placed upon children in the glare of public attention, of the fragility of innocence amidst ambition, and of the human desire to find meaning in inexplicable loss. Her legacy endures not in trophies or titles, but in the questions that remain unanswered in the cultural dialogue about childhood, fame, and vulnerability. Some believe her death became a symbol of what can be lost when the world demands too much of the young, when appearances conceal the complex truths of private life. Decades later, JonBenét's image remains etched in collective memory. The precocious smile frozen in photographs, the sparkling costumes that once brought her acclaim, the whispers of what might have been. Investigators, journalists, and enthusiasts continue to examine the details, each revisit, deepening both fascination and despair. Rumors persist, theories evolve, yet the certainty of her presence in the world, however brief, cannot be diminished. According to those who study the case, her story is emblematic of the intersection between vulnerability and visibility, a haunting reminder that some mysteries defy closure. JonBenét Ramsey's life, though tragically short, carries a resonance that reaches far beyond Boulder, Colorado. It is a story of charm and intelligence, of ambition and pressure, of familial complexity and societal scrutiny. It is a narrative that confronts us with uncomfortable truths about innocence and obsession, about the fragile boundary between love and expectation, between protection and performance. Her legacy is not only in the headlines or the crime scene photographs, but in the questions that linger, in the ethical reflection provoked by her untimely death, and in the haunting awareness that some stories leave shadows that never fully fade. The news reports that first announced her death now echo with a weight far heavier than mere words. They were the surface tremors of a life that contained brilliance, expectation, and unspoken tension. Behind those headlines lay a story that no investigation could fully untangle, a mystery that continues to haunt the public imagination, and a reminder that the most luminous lives can sometimes be the most fragile. JonBenét Ramsey's life was a brief, shining anomaly, a tale of promise, precocity, and tragedy that persists in the shadows of memory. The mystery remains unresolved yet indelible, leaving us to ponder not only what happened, but what might have been, and what her story reveals about the world we inhabit, the lives we observe, and the innocence we are compelled to protect.